to the Nevada Patriot Podcast with Matt Sadler.
Welcome to the Nevada Patriot Podcast with Matt Sadler. As usual, I am your host, and this recording date is Wednesday, September 20th, 2023. I hope your summer has been everything you've hoped for and dreamed for in this wonderful Bidenomics economy. I hope you viewers and listeners are safe and satisfied. As always, I want to thank you for tuning in to kwkiradio.com, Rumble, YouTube, and of course, the NevadaPatriot.com. You'll catch the show every Tuesday and every Saturday at 7 p.m. and 10 p.m. on kwkiradio.com and 97.7 FM here in Pahrump, although right now the broadcast area is kind of limited, so bear with us on that. So Fall Festival, it's here, and starting tomorrow, Thursday, the 21st, beginning at 5 p.m. and going through Sunday, the 24th. So make sure to stop by our GCon booth, Grassroots Conservatives of Nevada. Today's episode is actually brought to you in part by Grassroots Conservatives of Nevada. Make sure you stop by. We'll be next door to the Nye County GOP booth, as well as very close to a very popular barbecue spot. So make sure you grab a bite to eat, come by, say hello, check our booth out, and let's talk politics. We'll have a free gift basket drawing as well. Hopefully 2 different gift baskets, depending upon how it comes together here. And I promise not to sell your data to to a million places a million times, just like our tech oligarchs at the lovely Facebook and Apple, Amazon conglomeration that we're dealing with. We promise not to do any of that. So it's strictly in-house. We'll have your information that we'll need for the drawing, but good luck to all you. Hopefully one of you gets to take home one of these good gift baskets. So with all that being said, I'd be remiss to not recommend you viewers, especially, changing your video viewing platform from YouTube to Rumble if you can. Please do yourself a big favor and begin that agonizing YouTube divorce proceeding, and I'm sure you'll be glad that you did. Hate to do it, but our show, sometimes you get some griping, and the show is not going to be any different. So want to plug in some good news. Parade on Saturday starting at 9 p.m. Not 9 p.m. Don't show up at 9 p.m. There will be no parade. Trust me, there'll be a few characters walking up and down 160. One of them had a lampshade on his head last I saw him. That was very interesting the other night. So be on the lookout for those folks, whether they're wearing lampshades on their heads or not. It gets dark on that road. Please keep an eye on some of our pedestrians. Appears to be some new transplants out here. New people every day walking up and down that street, I've been noticing. So yeah, the parade starts 9 a.m. Saturday, beginning at the near the intersection of Dandelion and Highway 160, and it's going to go north all the way past Basin to Boot Hill, so past Patriot Park, and that'll be the ending route. So make sure you say hi, wave. We'll be on the corner of 372 and 160 this year. I've got the privilege of being one of the judges for the parade, so honored to do that. I hear there's going to be roughly 68, I think now, possibly up to 70 different parade floats. So that's actually a very, very good turnout this year. So congrats to Reva Braun and the parade committee that's been doing a lot of hard work getting that assembled and getting that together for this fall festival. So hopefully we see you guys at either the parade or the park. There's obviously going to be a carnival there, rodeo for sure. Plenty of vendors, music, a good DJ. It's going to be a good time, so make sure you check it out on either Thursday, Friday, Saturday, or Sunday. I don't believe there's going to be carnival rides on Thursday night, tomorrow night. I believe that doesn't begin until Friday, if I'm not mistaken. So you might want to check with the Town of Pahrump website on that. Just wanted to give you guys fair warning, because I think one of these past seasons, one of these years, I took my kids on a Thursday night and they did not open the rides up on that night. So just giving a little bit of courtesy information there. So going into our gripe portion of the podcast here. So there's really 3 topics I wanted to touch on. The first one is, so U.S. Senate candidates out there, if you've already declared for your candidacy on the GOP side to run in the U.S. Senate race, I know for a fact there's about 8 of you, 9 of you, I believe. I've reached out to, I think, every campaign for the upcoming debate that's going to be held here in Pahrump. I understand not everybody's going to be able to make every single political event. I know firsthand. You have to make decisions on what you're going to do and what you're not going to do. But what you can always do is you can always RSVP or politely decline invitations when you've been reached out to a lot of times. So we've got 4 commitments to the U.S. Senate debate. Still looking for at least 2 and probably 3 more. Surprisingly, there's been 3 candidates I've been really trying to pursue to get some kind of information from their campaign. I mean, on their site, they say how accessible they are, how they're for the people. Well, I'm a constituent, I'm a voter, and I myself have been reaching out to you personally through emails, contact forms, email addresses on there that say press and different info at blah, blah, blah .com. Tried it all, not getting responses from several of you. So I'm not going to be chapped if you don't show up to my event, but just say no. Say you got some other political campaign event going on. Say you're going to be staring at wet paint. I don't really care. It'd be nice if you just responded one way or the other, because just putting it out there, the voting block here in Pahrump is kind of a bellwether. So a lot of us Pahrumpians, we have attachments still to various areas, like in Las Vegas. I was born and raised out there, so obviously I know a lot of people, and being active politically and being the loudmouth that I am, I'm sure, my influence is fairly well-rounded and respected out there, just like a ton of other people I deal with out here in Pahrump that are politically active. They have ties to different areas, some of them even up north in northern Nevada. So in other words, what I'm saying is, if your presence has been begged for out here and you don't respond at all and you ghost out, don't be surprised if some people in Pahrump are a little bit irritated and chapped, and you Pahrump voters. Consider this. There was a major election that the Republicans, lost by about 8,000 votes that would have really tipped the scales in Congress, in the U.S. Senate. So our vote matters. There's a lot more than 8,000 rural voters out here in Nye County. So, if you don't see them at the debate, if they're not making an honest, good faith effort to connect with you, please consider voting for those candidates that are making an effort to connect with you. And there are several, and I've met personally with a couple of them. Great candidates, worthy of your consideration. So, so U.S. Senate candidates, I know Las Vegas, Reno, North Las Vegas, Henderson, those other major cities in our state, they're going to require a huge amount of your attention. But if you pay all of your attention to just those areas, you do so at your own peril. I'll just leave it at that. Next topic I want to go to, because I'm tired of beating up on Republican candidates, is going to be the blame game that we're seeing going on involving our Nye County Sheriff's Office, losing officers, losing deputies, the Board of County Commissioners not necessarily being receptive to coming to the table to have new talks, to do something to curb some of the losses that we're experiencing, because objectively we're losing deputies that are going to other agencies. Some of these agencies include, our neighbors to the south, like the Las Vegas area, like whether it's Metro or, the North Las Vegas Police Department, the Henderson Police Department, Nevada Highway Patrol. It's no, surprise that our pay scale is a little bit different, being in a rural county like ours here in Nye County, on what we're able to offer as far as packages go, with benefits, wages for our deputies. And for a long time, I think our deputies, by and large, understand that there's a trade-off, right? So maybe to make slightly less or have slightly less package. It makes more sense to have some of the benefits of being, a peace officer in Nye County. But there comes a time when you got to look at the ratios, and if law enforcement officers are making upwards of $7, $8, $9, even up to, I heard, $11 per hour difference in some of these other agencies, it's no wonder that they are looking, to see if the grass is greener on the other side, because that's just what you want to do, and especially in a time like this when inflation is it's runaway, it's out of control. The cost of living has skyrocketed. I think from now and looking back to maybe right before we moved out here into Pahrump, I think housing prices, rents and stuff like that have probably doubled. It's tough. It's tough to make ends meet. I think most peace officers don't necessarily only do their job for the pay and the benefits, but they certainly earn good pay and good benefits by doing the job, and I think they're rightfully should be compensated. Now, you can say all you want about, a contract is a contract, and they opened up negotiations a while back. Those negotiations, all parties agreed to certain pay scale, certain benefits, different things like that. They mutually agreed upon it, and it's not time for that to come up again. Now, legally and factually, that might be the case, but in the reality, in the real world, when push comes to shove, if we have an exodus of officers and deputies that just leave here, the community has a real public safety problem, right? I mean, that's an objective fact. If you call 911 when you're being home invaded by a crazy person with a lampshade on their head and a machete, you want to have an officer respond relatively quickly. But if we don't have the right amount of patrol deputies and such, policing and protecting our communities, regardless of the reason, whether it was because of a contract they agreed to or not, the fact of the matter is we might not have the personnel to help us out when we need it. And ultimately, it's an issue that the leadership has to address. So good leaders lead. They don't always have to say, well, this isn't really my job description. This wasn't part of the deal, blah, blah, blah. The blame game can go back and forth. But ultimately, what ends up happening, the voters, the population, the neighbors, we all want certain services and certain protections from our government officials. So if you're in a leadership spot, sometimes that puts you in a place where you have to lead in certain ways that you might not 100% feel comfortable in. But ultimately, when the buck stops at you and you can do something about something and you can actually affect some kind of change and you choose not to, then you have to reap the consequences of that. Trump didn't want, I'm sure he never bargained on COVID becoming an issue in his presidency. And look how that shaped policy, how that shaped his future election and everything else, the dynamics of the country. Unfortunately, when bad things happen, when you're in position of leadership, you deal with it, you roll with the punches, like they say. So at the end of the day, we have to hold our leaders to a certain accounting that, if this issue with pay is the reason why we're going to lose officers to such a degree that our community is less safe and we're unprotected, and the elected officials have had mechanisms by which they could stop that, help that process come to a peaceful, good resolution, and they choose not to, well, then you've earned a significant portion of the blame. If you have the opportunity to do something good and you choose not to, that's still a choice, right? So there's plenty of things that we can all go through and that we do in a day that we don't have to. We're not mandated to. We didn't sign a contract to do it. It's not illegal to not do it. But as a good person, as a good community resident that you do, right? So most men listening and viewing the show, I'm sure you're not going to let a door at the Saddle West as you're running to go get all you can eat ribs. You're going to let the door slam on a lady holding a baby or on an elderly person with a cane or or an oxygen machine. No, you're going to do the right thing. You're going to actually hold that door open. You might even let them go to the front of the line, right? Do you legally have to do that? No, you don't have to, but it's a good thing to do because you have the opportunity and you're in the right time and you're in the right place to do it. So you do it. So when you run for election and you run for these offices, or you're seeking an appointment, or you're seeking a position in the public trust or the public vote, it comes with all the privileges comes the responsibilities. Ultimately, is what I'm trying to get at. So, but ultimately too, not to sit here and beat up on the county commissioners or staff with NCSO when it comes to paying. It's the problem ultimately is rooted in horrible federal policies that have been enacted in recent years. I mean, make no mistake about it. We're $33 trillion in debt and counting. My goodness, if you tried to count to 33 trillion, I don't know what the math is. I heard the math was like over 1 million years it would take you to count to 33 trillion. It's a number that we can't even really fathom the size of a number like that. It's just monumental. And this is what we keep passing on to future generations. And not to mention, when you're trying to ease different matters by flooding the economy with funny money, with money that they're just kind of printing and putting out of thin air, they call it quantitative easing. You're going to cause inflation. When you're incentivizing people not to work, when you're giving them tons of money, whether it's through the COVID type programs or other grant programs, things like that, what are you basically doing? You are flooding the market with more money, going after the same goods, and ultimately it's going to drive the prices up for those goods. There's going to be a time, if we continue down the pace that we're at, it's not going to be that items that we need and rely on are going to be too expensive, which no doubt they are getting more expensive for sure. We just won't even have them. If it becomes cost prohibitive for distribution to get certain items in the store, you're just not going to have any of those choices. And I think we can all see that the grocery store choices are getting lower and lower and lower. Go through an aisle and you only have maybe 2 or 3 choices, where years ago you'd have like 5 or 6, 7, 8 choices of a different type of product or different brands to choose from. Or sizes, quantities, different things like that. We're not seeing those choices. Our grocery stores are going to start resembling Cuban or Venezuelan grocery stores more and more as the years go on, if we don't start getting new leadership out here. And it's monumentally important for us to stop the bleeding. It's been said in different times that, every election season, especially the last one, the last major general one, which was 2020, was considered at the time to be the most important election of our time. And I hear that being said now. And I think ultimately, the ship has kind of sailed, but there's still a lot of bleeding that we can stop, because basically I don't think we're going to get to the position that we had, especially prior to the whole pandemic hysteria and all that. What we need to do, and why this one is monumentally important, and maybe the most important, is because, versus a slow descent, a drop off a cliff is way worse. And I think we're about to nosedive off of a cliff if we don't get new leadership in power, especially in Washington, D.C., especially in the Oval Office. We need a principled, conservative wave to come that didn't come in 2022. We really need that now, heading into 2024. And that's up and down the ticket. I'm seeing major changes in our own community. I know I'm not alone in that. The dynamics of just when you're driving down the street and when you're looking at new folks and you're wondering where all these folks are coming from, it makes you wonder, if what we're doing in our town and in the nation in general is we're stressing and straining the system to the point where once the dam breaks, we'll have no choice but to run to our nanny government to try to fix the problem. And I think that's by design. I think ultimately the system that we've had in our country, where we have, you have such a spectrum. You have, you could be dirt poor when I was a kid in our country and still be a happy human being with more freedom and more liberty than most people in the world. And then you work your way up the ladder. Then you get to then you're working class, and then you're working hard and getting promotions or starting your own business, and then you can get to the lower middle class, and then the middle class, and then eventually upper middle class. And sure, not everybody's going to have the same opportunities as Donald Trump. Starting off with millions of dollars in a real estate portfolio for investment and things like that. So naturally, the glass ceiling is going to be a little bit higher for someone like Donald Trump. But make no mistake about it. I mean, have you ever met people that are worth, several $million? They don't go without, right? So there's levels to wealth. But if you're saying some person can go from dirt poor to being a multi-millionaire, that is a huge jump, and that's a jump that's only possible in a country like ours. Now you can always say, well, that person doesn't have the same opportunity as Donald Trump. Well, when you go from being making $1,000 a year to making $1 million a year, I would say that's a monumental opportunity. And that's why you're seeing, hordes of people trying to come into our country for these same opportunities, but ultimately they're going to stress the system to the point of breakage. And I think it's by design, but it's important that we at the local level, we elect public officials that will see the writing on the wall, that will put in measures now and implement measures now, even if some people will say, well, that's a very short-sighted and that's not very nice and this is that. We should be welcoming. And no, there's a limit to the resources a community like ours has, that we should not necessarily be a magnet for people who have, that they could be homeless, that they're not going to come here to be productive members of our community that are going to be working hard, paying taxes, contributing. And I'm not making any determination as to whether they're good people or bad people, or whether I would do the same thing if I was in their shoes. That's a whole nother argument. Those are answers to questions that I'm not even asking right now. What I'm asking is, can our system take it when there's so many people that are taking from the system without producing, without giving back to the system? And the answer to that on the micro level in the town of Pahrump or in the county of Nye is no. The answer in the United States government, in the United States as a country, it's no. If you have too many people taking and not producing or making, you're going to implode. You're going to overwhelm the system. And, when things are heading down a negative track like this, one of two things happens in any nation. If you read any history, you either get what's called, the crumbling or the imploding of an entire nation, like you see with the Roman Republic, or you see revolution. And sometimes that's violent, scary revolution. And, you look to France in history, you look to our own nation's founding, our separation from the British and the Revolutionary War. Those are things that happen when things finally get bad enough to where people aren't going to take it. And now we all have friends and family that they would consider themselves to probably be non-political or not even part of the not even considering themselves political in any way, shape, or form until something happened, like during the pandemic. And I looked at friends and family that saw what was happening more closely in the schools when all the changes happened and kids were taken out of school and put on, like the computer, the online programs, which ultimately ended up robbing a segment of our kids' lives and just kind of erasing it. Proms being canceled, homecomings canceled, kids losing a year or more of their education, basically, because of all the changes, and they couldn't learn in the classroom. And then also the parents that see what's being taught in our classrooms. And I think a lot of them had some major shock on the curriculums. And then for the first time, they were like, wow, how is this going on? And it causes a little bit of an awakening. And we see that with local school boards across the nation now, where parents are, their eyes are open more and they're more involved. And many of these parents that are speaking passionately about their children's education, maybe a few years ago, were not even political at all. So what I'm saying is, don't wait until we reach this critical mass where we have to be so reactive to keeping our country, or to making our country turn away from the ditch. Why not get ahead of the game now? Get more involved. Don't be afraid to talk, quote unquote, things that are perceived to be impolite at the dinner table. We've all heard it for years, right? Growing up, it's impolite to talk about religion or politics at the dinner table, or to talk about politics in polite company. Well, I can think of nothing more important than talking about some of these issues in polite company, while we still have the freedoms and liberties that we have to even do that. Because there could be a time, like in different countries, where you want to go talk religion or talk Christianity with someone else. You have to whisper, or you have to write it down, because Big Brother is looking at you and ready to throw you in a gulag or throw you in jail for your First Amendment. I mean, we're seeing it now, right? We're seeing the First and Second Amendment completely under assault in our own country. We're seeing the compelling of speech. We're actually seem to be following suit with all the wacky stuff that's happening, say in Canada or somewhere, where people are being punished for how they speak. And the one thing that separates us from a lot of these countries that have these problems has always been our Bill of Rights, has always been our First Amendment. But the First Amendment, the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, it's only going to be as important as we allow it to be, and I'll elaborate on what that means. There's been nations when I talk to folks out here, I've been asked sometimes by some wise old gentlemen, what kind of government do we have out here? And the answer they're looking for is, they're looking for me to say something along the lines of, a constitutional republic, or the word constitution, republic, and all that in the word. So when I say something like representative republic, they act like that's a bad thing, but it's really not, because a constitutional republic, although normally in our context, is a good thing, right? Because our Constitution is the greatest man-made document of all time. But there's been nations that have had horrible governments, been abusive to their people, and they've had constitutions, but their constitution was lousy, right? So look at maybe Iraq or something in the 70s, 80s, and even into the 90s. I'm sure they did lots of constitutional things, but their constitution was not strong, was not fair, was not liberty driven. It's only as good as how it's written, and it's only good beyond that on how it's actually revered by our leaders. Because, correct me if I'm wrong, but the Second Amendment, for instance, has been under assault for decades now, really. What part of shall not be infringed is so hard to understand, but every time you turn around, you're seeing, whether it's a gun ban in one city, handgun ban in one city, extra excessive taxes on ammunitions in another, or limitations on ammunitions or gun accessories in other places, whether the laws are federal or they're state, there's infringement going on left and right. So for practical sake, the Second Amendment is not being revered by our leaders, and they're allowing it to be eroded over time and time. And you hear that same saying that I heard ad nauseum since I was in junior high school about common sense gun reform, common sense gun laws, when almost every single one of these common sense gun laws is objectively attacking the Second Amendment. The Second Amendment is part of the Constitution now. It's in the bill. It's the Bill of Rights. It's a Constitution. That's the supreme law of the land, being trampled on by municipalities and states and federal bureaucracies for decades now. So what I'm getting at is, we have to place this Constitution in high regard and continue to battle for the sanctity of it, Because if we don't, it becomes more and more this quote unquote living, breathing document that whoever's the power in control gets to tell you what it means instead of just going by what it means. The Constitution means what it means in perpetuity. There's no living, breathing, changing dynamic to it, just like the Bible. Black and white, right and wrong, good interpretation, and then the wrong interpretation. Actually, there's the interpretation, and then everything else is the wrong interpretation. So unless you get it right, you get it wrong. And what we have right now in our society is everybody trying to look and do things and do what's right in their own eyes, and to our detriment, really. And I don't want to let other fellow Christians off the hook, and maybe even me, because for years I was keeping, the idea of the sacred and the secular kind of separate, right? But what does the Bible really say about all that? The Bible doesn't really make a distinction to being a secular person in this regard of your life, and then a spiritual person in this regard of your life. There's a molding and a merging of just how you're supposed to be. So what I'm largely getting at is a lot of these issues, and we think that they're only national issues, they really trickle all the way down to the very local. Because ultimately, to tie this in like with a little bow, is to say that these policies at the federal level, this Bidenomics, this Bidenflation, this constant spending from the executive branch, the constant allocation of billions upon billions of dollars to places like the Ukraine, this printing of money, this giving of free stuff to everybody, free money, has driven the cost of goods up, has driven the cost of living up to such an extent that now our local law enforcement is looking for different alternatives, because many of them can't keep up with the style of living, even in a place like Pahrump, with the amount of money they're able to take home in comparison to other jobs they could be doing or other agencies they can be working for. So the blame goes to the federal government. The blame goes to Joe Biden. The blame can go to the bureaucracies, the Fed, you name it, that are devaluing our currency, that are robbing our future generations of economic prosperity, and that are ultimately making our communities less safe, because we are feeling the real world effects of inflation in ways now in our community that we can't keep up with. See, Vegas and other cities, other counties, whether they have mining as a major economic boom, or they have tourism, casino gaming, things like that, adult entertainment that you find in places like Las Vegas, that drives their economy. So therefore, they're able to hedge against inflation better than a community like ours can do. A lot of folks in Nye County move here to retire. A lot of the jobs are, there is a service industry aspect out here as well. So we're not beyond gaming and different things like that does have a certain amount of tourism dollars attached to it. But in no way, shape, or form are we on the same playing field as places like Nye County or other counties that are feeling the real good economic benefits from industries like mining. We don't have that out here. So inflation has made it to where it's harming you as a Nye County or Pahrump resident. And we really need our local leaders to step in. Not that they caused all this on their own. They didn't cause these problems on their own, but they're the ones in charge right now that can do something about it. And the question is, are they going to do something beneficial about it? Are they going to help the situation, or are they not going to help the situation? So ultimately, that's a leadership issue, and that's something you need to consider next time when you're at the voting booth, seeing who you're going to vote for, because leadership stuff is tough. I mean, I can remember being a manager at a play it again sports shop, so selling and consigning new and used sports equipment. You see the political implications of being a manager there. People talking behind your back. You're always going to get a little bit of shade. You're always going to get people unhappy. People are going to be talking trash about you in the break room because you're the person that's the boss. But that's what you sign up for when you have a leadership position, whether it's managerial, whether it's by promotion or a nomination process or an election process. You're still kind of signing up for that. So that's the burden that you kind of have to carry. So now tying that back to us as the voters. So oftentimes we complain that money has such a drastic effect on our local politics, our national politics, at the end of the day, the same people that don't even talk to their neighbor or their brother or their cousin or their Uncle Henry or whoever it might be about politics and who to vote for because they think it's impolite are the same people that are complaining that money is having too much sway in politics and causing people to vote badly, or they're just following the advertising campaign of whoever spends the most money. And sadly, that's kind of true. But you can't complain about it if you're not going to do anything about it. So what I'm saying is, if you want to take the role of money and its power in politics, and you want to diminish that effect, you have to do something on your own too, as a good steward of the rights and liberties that have been granted to you by virtue of being in this country. And if you think those values and those virtues are important to pass on to your other future generations and to your neighbors and to your kids and to your kids' kids, then you have to get involved, because otherwise the mega money machine, and now you commingle that with the corrupt tech giants out there controlling the news, controlling social media interactions. If you're not doing it on a real world level and talking to real life human beings and getting involved in your community and getting involved with your neighbors and talking to your friends about it, even the ones who would rather talk about football and fantasy football. And I don't know what this fascination is. Every Christian event that I've gone to, I think the talk always meanders and it's going to fantasy football, or who's your favorite college football team, or what do you think, Alabama? Does the Tide have a chance to win it again this year? It's like, my goodness, there's so many more important things to talk about, and none of us are doing it. And some of my fellow Christians out there, they want to keep that separated. But I don't think the Bible gives you room for that, because you can't use the argument that God's in control and God wants you just to love one another and to worship Him and to know that He's in control and He's going to take care of all these things. And that is true, because if you believe the Bible, that is true. But at the same time, there's certain things that you're expected to do, responsibilities that you're expected to have. When my little boy wakes up in the morning and I've got to get him ready for school, I don't just trust in God that He's going to teleport him to his class. He's going to comb his hair. He's going to feed him. He's going to magically just have his teeth brushed for me. There's certain things that I'm expected to do to get him ready to go to school. There's certain things that you're expected to do biblically as a responsible human being that the Bible gives you counsel and instruction on it. And I don't know why for years and years and years, local churches have shied away from that. It's like, when you read the Bible, you're reading the full counsel of God. And when you have a preacher up there preaching about the full counsel of God, it's supposed to be preaching the full counsel of God. And then you have to wonder, well, maybe the Bible doesn't speak into these avenues, but I assure you it does. It speaks into the avenues of your responsibility within the context of your family, especially of your wife, your relationship to God, your relationship to your neighbor, and how you are to be a champion for things that are good, that are morally excellent. The things that God loves, you should love and battle for. Not that you don't have to trust that He's ultimately got it under control, but it's like you have to battle for these things because you know He has it under control and He has these expectations of you to be involved and to be a force for good out there. So I don't buy the cop-out mentality of so many well-minded people that I know that just are not political, and they're not going to probably get there until we're nosediving off of a cliff and there's nothing to hang on to anymore. And I just don't want it to get to that point. So anyway, I hope I hope this didn't depress you too much. I hope everybody gets a great night's sleep tonight, or whenever you go to bed, and whenever you're hearing this, or you have a good productive day at work if you're listening to this before you're headed to work or whatever. I hope you get a chance to come by our booth and say hello. We're going to be kind of near the end, like I said, near that barbecue joint, near the local Republican Party booth. We'll have hopefully some of the local and maybe even national level politicians kind of hanging out. If you want to mingle with them, meet with them, by all means, come on around. And we'd love to have you. Free drawings are going to be there. It's going to be a good time. Good music, good DJ, good live entertainment. Like always, it's the Fall Festival is something that you have to make time for. It's going to be a good time. So with that all being said, we're going to wrap this up here. And I thank you for listening. I thank you for watching. And on behalf of the Nevada Patriot podcast, God bless you.
Election day is around the corner, and you'll soon have a million choices to make at the ballot box. But right now, your number one choice for freedom is a no-brainer. It's Matt Sadler with a Hope Bail Bond. Choose Matt Sadler for your Nevada bail bondsman. Matt Sadler has been your number one local bail agent 3 years running. Nye County. Let's keep Matt Sadler in his office. For the best way out of jail, call 442-BAIL. He's Matt Sadler, and he approves your freedom. Thank you for listening. Tell a friend and join us next time. After you catch your breath, check out the NevadaPatriot.com for more content, advertising opportunities, and to give listener feedback. That website again is the NevadaPatriot.com. Until next time, Patriots, stay American.